The Young and the Restless Spoilers. The news of Audra's shooting spread through Genoa City like wildfire, an echo of shock and speculation that could not be contained. For all the disdain people might have felt for her cunning ways, her bold ambition, and her relentless manipulations, no one could deny that her sudden fall was a tragedy that left ripples across the city. Whispers traveled from one corner of society to another. Audra had been found bleeding, her life slipping away. And in those final moments, she became not just a woman destroyed, but the epicenter of a conspiracy that threatened to destroy everyone around her. For years, she had played with fire, aligning herself with powerful men, leveraging secrets, and manipulating opportunities. But in the end, her tangled path intersected with one man whose reach extended further than anyone dared challenge. Victor Newman. Kyle had not loved Audra. In fact, he had grown to despise her duplicity, her attempts to wedge herself between him and Claire, her reckless power games that always seemed to put Jabbat at risk. Yet when he found her collapsing, a bullet ripping through her, instinct overcame resentment. He caught her as she fell, his arms cradling the woman who had caused him so much turmoil. In that moment, the hatred dissolved into something more primal: urgency of life and death. Kyle shouted for help, rushing her into the hospital, refusing to let her bleed out on the cold ground like just another casualty of Genoa City's endless wars. He did not want her blood on his conscience, not when she could still be saved. But despite the best efforts of the doctors, the damage was too severe. The bullet had torn through her in a way that no surgery could repair, and Audra's breaths grew shallow, her voice breaking as she clung to the last shreds of life. It was then, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit haze of the hospital, that Audra revealed the most damning truth. She had seen the shooter. Her fading eyes carried recognition, and her trembling lips whispered the name of the man who had ended her life: Victor Newman. The revelation sent shockwaves through Kyle's system. Audra could have remained silent, could have used her final moments to curse those who hated her, but instead she chose to unveil the truth. And not only the name of her killer revealed 5 secrets, each one a blade aimed at the empire Victor had built. They spilled from her in gasps and fragmented words, a chain of confessions that burned into Kyle's memory. Secrets about illegal deals, betrayals hidden behind corporate facades, manipulations that stretched beyond Newman Enterprises and touched the very foundation of Genoa City's power. Each secret was not just a dying woman's rambling, but a weapon that could dismantle Victor's reign if wielded correctly. But time was not on Kyle's side. Even before Audra's body grew cold, Victor had set the stage. The crime scene was masterfully arranged to point directly to Kyle Abbott. Every piece of evidence seemed irrefutable: fingerprints, gun residue, surveillance angles that painted him as the man pulling the trigger. It was a performance of deception so flawless that the police and the public had no reason to doubt it. Kyle was already known for his disdain of Audra, and his turbulent relationship with her in the past only added weight to the accusations. Victor understood the art of framing an enemy, and he knew that if Kyle were destroyed, the Abbotts would be thrown into chaos, weakened enough for him to extend his influence further over Jabbat and over their family legacy. To the world, it was simple. Kyle Abbott had motive, opportunity, and evidence stacked against him. Yet Kyle knew the truth, and the truth was his only weapon. He could not sit back and let himself be devoured by a lie. The memory of Audra's last breaths haunted him, her fragile whisper of Victor's name echoing in his ears alongside the dangerous secrets she had handed over like a cursed inheritance. If he allowed himself to fall into Victor's trap, those secrets would die with him, and the Abbott family would crumble under the weight of a crime they did not commit. He had no choice but to fight back, not with rage, not with empty words, but with strategy as sharp as the one Victor had unleashed. Kyle became a man on a mission, balancing grief with fury, betrayal with resilience. The battle was more complicated than it seemed. Victor was not just a man, but an institution in Genoa City, his name synonymous with power and untouchable dominance. To accuse him directly would be suicide. No one would believe it, not without proof that could withstand Victor's inevitable counterattack. Kyle knew he needed evidence that could not be erased or twisted, evidence that would make even Victor's allies question him. Audra's 5 secrets were the starting point, but they were like scattered puzzle pieces. Kyle would have to put them together, trace the threads she had left behind, and follow them into the shadows where Victor's hidden dealings lay buried. Each step would place him in danger, each discovery making him a bigger target, but he could not afford to stop. Meanwhile, the Abbott family found themselves in a storm they could barely comprehend. Jack was furious at the very suggestion that his son could commit such a crime, yet he knew the way the evidence had been presented was airtight. Diane's suspicions about Claire seemed almost trivial now compared to the noose tightening around Kyle's neck. The family was split between anger and fear, between the instinct to shield Kyle and the realization that fighting Victor required more than emotion. They had been enemies before, but this time was different. Victor had struck directly at their blood, framing Kyle in a way that could end not only his life, but also Jabbett's stability. As Kyle dug deeper into the secrets Audra had revealed, he realized each one was like a trapdoor opening into a deeper level of Victor's machinations, illegal funding channels that could topple corporations if exposed, hidden alliances with figures Genoa City believed to be long gone, cover-ups of crimes that would shatter reputations, manipulations of the justice system that proved Victor's reach extended into courtrooms and police stations, and perhaps most damning of all, a betrayal that cut through the Newman family at Salfoni that, if revealed, could turn Victor's own allies into enemies. With every revelation, Kyle saw not just his chance at survival, but the potential to end Victor's untouchable reign. Yet he also knew Victor was watching. Every move he made was dangerous. Every ally he approached could already be compromised. The more Kyle uncovered, the more he understood the brilliance of Victor's framing. It was not just about punishing him, it was about making him appear desperate, unstable, guilty in the eyes of everyone else. If he pursued the truth too aggressively, people would say he was scrambling to cover his guilt. If he stayed silent, he would be devoured by the narrative Victor had written for him. The only path forward was to walk the razor's edge, gathering proof in the shadows while outwardly appearing calm, even as the storm closed in. Audra's death, cruel as it was, had given Kyle both a curse and a mission. Her final words, her secrets, and her fragile trust in him to carry the truth forward became the fuel he needed to resist despair. She had been a manipulator, yes, and often his adversary, but in her last breath she had chosen to hand him the key to dismantling the man who had taken her life. For that, Kyle could not let her die in vain. He would fight for himself, for his family, for the company Victor sought to destroy, and for the justice Audra deserved. Whether it meant tearing through corporate lies, unearthing the darkest truths, or risking his own freedom, Kyle would not stop until Victor Newman's frame job collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. And so, the stage was set for a war that would shake Genoa City to its core. Victor had made his move, striking with the precision of a master, but Kyle was no longer the naive son of Jack Abbott. He was a man cornered, armed with secrets, and driven by a fury that only betrayal could ignite. The battle for justice, for survival, and for the future of the Abbott name was only just beginning. The death of Audra Charles in Nice was not just another casualty of Genoa City's endless web of rivalries. It was a crime that reverberated across borders, sparking outrage, suspicion, and the heavy hand of international law enforcement. The moment the news broke, French authorities moved quickly, sealing off the crime scene with an efficiency that left no room for error. This was not a case to be dismissed as random violence or a lover's quarrel gone wrong. From the placement of the bullet to the calculated nature of her ambush, it was clear this was a planned assassination, the kind of crime that carried the weight of conspiracy behind it. The police in Nice knew they had to treat it with utmost care. If they appeared sloppy or complacent, public anger would swell, not just in France, but back in the United States, where Audra had made a name for herself in both business and scandal. In the hospital, As the machines beeped their final rhythms and her life ebbed away, Audra had given Kyle a gift wrapped in blood and tragedy. She had whispered a Nemea single beneath it would shift the axis of everything he thought he knew. The producers of her story ensured that the name remained concealed from the audience, building suspense that would stretch across weeks, perhaps months, of the narrative. The truth of who pulled the strings, of who ultimately wanted Audra silenced, was the kind of revelation that could not be rushed. All Kyle knew, all the audience was permitted to see, was the shock that washed across his face as he leaned closer to catch her fragile words. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and in that moment it was clear the person she named was someone powerful, someone untouchable, someone whose guilt would rock Genoa City to its foundations. The weight of the secret pressed on Kyle like a stone on his chest, and though he wanted to cry out, to demand answers, he also knew that silence would be his only weapon. But Audra had given him more than a name. In her final breaths, her trembling hands gripping his sleeve, she revealed fragments of 5 dangerous secrets, threads of corruption, betrayal, and manipulation that led back to the man she had named. They were not coherent confessions, but broken phrases, coded clues that Kyle would have to piece together if he ever wanted to bring the truth to light. The irony was bitter. Audra had been a schemer all her life, a woman who thrived on secrets and manipulation, and yet at the end, she entrusted the truth to the one man who had every reason to hate her. It was her way of making peace, of leaving behind more than scandal and bitterness, and perhaps of ensuring that her death would mean something greater than her life had ever allowed. The investigation in Nice quickly narrowed its focus. The evidence seemed almost too perfect, too conveniently arranged to implicate Kyle Abbott. Witness statements conflicted, some swearing they saw him near the scene, others unsure of what they had really seen in the chaos. Gunpowder residue was traced to his hands, fingerprints aligned suspiciously with the weapon found nearby, and surveillance footage captured enough of his silhouette to cast suspicion, but not enough to prove intent. To the casual eye, the case was open and shut. Kyle had the motive, given his volatile history with Audra, and the evidence lined up with frightening precision. But the police were wary. They knew when a crime scene was too clean, too neatly tied together, and this one reeked of orchestration. It carried the marks of a mastermind who had anticipated every angle of the investigation, who had planted evidence with the confidence of someone who understood law enforcement better than law enforcement understood itself. Still, the public outcry was intense. Social media lit up with grief and rage, fans of Audra's unapologetic ambition flooding timelines with tributes, photos, and angry demands for justice. Even those who had despised her could not deny the tragedy of her death. A woman silenced in the prime of her life. A character whose flaws made her fascinating and whose strength made her unforgettable. Justice for Audra trended globally, hashtags merging grief with fury, and the eyes of millions turned toward Nice, demanding accountability. For Kyle, this meant the pressure grew unbearable. He was already painted as the villain in the court of public opinion, a man scorned who lashed out in vengeance, a suspect whose silence seemed like guilt. What they did not know, what Kyle could not yet reveal, was that the true villain was far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. The name Audra had whispered was not a random associate, not a jealous lover, not a shadowy figure from her past. It was someone at the very heart of Genoa City's power structure, someone whose downfall would cause shockwaves that could topple empires. To reveal the name too soon would be to destroy his only chance at gathering proof. He needed to let the world believe the lie for now, even as it crushed him, because only by playing the role of the accused could he maneuver in the shadows, collecting the evidence that would one day shift the narrative. In the weeks following her death, tributes to Audra grew into something larger than anyone anticipated. Her character, once maligned, was celebrated as misunderstood, her ambition reframed as strength, her manipulations as survival tactics in a world that had always sought to crush women who dared to claim power. Fans flooded forums, critics wrote pieces praising her complexity, and Genoa City itself became a place divided between those who saw her as a victim and those who painted her as the author of her own destruction. Yet through it all, one truth remained. Audra was gone, and with her departure came a void filled not with peace, but with secrets and blood. Kyle carried those secrets like a curse, the knowledge of the name she had given him burning inside his chest. He could not share it with Jack or Diane. Not yet, for fear that even within his own family the truth could be twisted or leaked. He could not trust the police in Nice, knowing that Victor's reach or the reach of the man Audra had name it extended into corridors of power far beyond Genoa City. He was alone, a fugitive in spirit if not in law, tasked with the impossible mission of avenging Audra while saving himself. And as the showrunners intended, the audience was left on the edge of their seats, speculating endlessly, desperate for the moment when the veil would be lifted and the name of the killer would finally be spoken aloud. So ended Audra Charles's story, a woman who schemed, seduced, and lied her way through Genoa City, only to die with truth on her lips. She was flawed, yes, but she was also unforgettable. And though her body lay in the soil of Nice, her presence lingered, her secrets lived on, and her death ignited a war that would consume the Abbotts, the Newmans, and every corner of the world she had once tried to conquer. For the fans who had loved to hate her, she was suddenly transformed into a martyr, a tragic figure whose end demanded not only justice, but remembrance. Genoa City would move forward, as it always did, but Audra's shadow would remain. Her whispered secret, the name she had spoken, and the 5 truths she carried ensured that she would never be forgotten.